Happy Sunday, everybody. Hope you're all having a wonderful 4th of July weekend, if you're celebrating that in the States. Otherwise, hope you just had a good weekend. So every Sunday, what I like to do is I like to go over the best of one meta breakers. And so these are all decks that were successfully piloted into Mythic and had at least a 60% win rate. So, always fun ideas coming from these, ways to kind of improve upon your own brews. I think a lot of creativity is showcased in these decks, and I really enjoy doing them. And it's kind of a refreshing change to what we talk about a lot in the best of one, best of three review, meta review that I do every Monday. So, we're going to start things off here with Abzan Control by Pain Train, and they hit Mythic 54. Or they went 158 for a 63% win rate. All of these decks are publicly available on untapped.gg. One of the things to keep a lookout though for, there are ways to manipulate your MMR and climb into Mythic and kind of cheese your way there. The MMR looked good for this one. This space, I kind of showcased a deck very similar to this on Saturday, an Orsov control. So this is basically an Orsov control list, but splashing green for up the beanstalk. And so this is going to be really good against the creature-centric strategies, a little bit weaker to Azorius control and getting milled out. This version not running the robberies, so not this one doesn't have as many counters to the Azorius control as the Orsov control list did that I covered on Saturday. But we've got both versions of March, so this is particularly good against Boros Convoke. 2 copies of Cutdown is really good against the Monor Red Prowess to be able to hit the Slick Shot. The reason why this is really good against Boros Convoke, if you're new to Magic and returning, always got to point it out. You can you do this in response to their Gleeful Demolition, and it prevents them from being able to get the turn 2 Knight Errant of Eos. This one's particularly nice for that. March of Wretched Sorrow does hit Planeswalkers, but you can also get some life gains, so it's pretty good against Mono Red. Up the Beanstalk, I think, is really what is going to try to leverage our help us in the other control matchups, is just getting some card advantage. Usually it comes down to who has the most amount of lands and who has drawn the most cards. Sunset Revelry we typically see in the Azorius control space. Being able to gum up the ground makes it better against Mono Red aggro, less so against Mono Red Prowess, which is just going to fly over, but still some nice life stabilization. Celestis is classic, like gains you some life, filters you to your answers. Path of Perils in here to wipe the board, particularly good against Boros Convoke. Blotout is usually included in best of 3 lists as a good way to get rid of Aclazotz, which is a recurring threat. And costs a large amount of mana value. So Blotout here being kind of for the one-ofs off of Dimir midrange, Esper midrange, Orsov midrange that are running the Aclazotz. 2 copies of Wandering Emperor. Remember, rotation is happening on August 2nd, so we're going to be losing Streets of New Capenna, Neon Dynasty, Mid, and Vow. So Wandering Emperor is going to be going away, but we get to play with it for a little bit. Same with the Celestis. And this one's just amazing. It's often 2 removal in 1 card, or removal and a body, and can you just run away with games? One of the win conditions of the deck. We've got 3 copies of Sunfall, which is kind of a classic in the control space. Really going to help you against the mid-range decks that are not good at rebuilding the board. So Boros Convoke is pretty good from rebuilding from the Wraths. So you'll commonly have to use a Path of Peril and a Sunfall to really shut down Boros Convoke. Then we've got 2 copies of Deadly Cover-Up, this one being able to remove your opponent's win condition. And I really like this one against Azorius control, being able to remove the Wandering Emperors or the Jace. Sometimes you can just leave Azorius control with no win conditions. And so anything that's really running off of 1 key card, Deadly Cover-Up can remove all of those copies of those cards. And the trick, though, being that you do have to get the Planeswalker into the graveyard to be able to exile it, right? because it doesn't destroy planeswalkers. And then Farewell is another one that can wreck certain strategies, especially ones that are dependent on graveyards. This is good inclusion for the occasional deck of like Celestia enchantments. Sometimes you get like Azorius artifacts, where this also can just completely devastate their strategy. And then the other win condition outside of the Wandering Emperor is Vraska, Betrayal's Sting, and there's actually some fun little cheeky decks built around one turn killing them with poison counters, but not as much in the standard space. But still, a way to get a way to win the game. And then Virtue of Persistence is in here largely for the adventure side. The -3/-3 and gaining 2 life really helps stabilize against Monor Red. And then you do have the ability to take creature cards from your opponent's list, because this list has no creatures. So you're only going to be playing with the creatures that your opponents have. And part of the reason why this is worse against Azorius control is because a lot of these cards can be dead if your opponent is not running a creature-based strategy. Oh, the other thing too, before I forget, the meta breakers that I cover on Sunday, I always hold a poll here on YouTube, and so remember to place your vote, and I'll choose the one that has the most votes to showcase in the next Saturday gameplay video. It's always fun to see which one of the decks caught the most of the public's attention. Number 2 here is Nia Discover by Jing, and hit Mythic 172 for 109 and 63 for a 63% win rate, and is also weak against Azorius control. I've played around a little bit with this deck, several different versions of it. The real core of it really is these first 3 cards. So Angel Fire Ignition gives you Vigilance, which works really nicely with the Hammer Skull, because if the Hammer Skull isn't tapping while it's attacking, then you get the it doesn't matter that it has a stun counter on it because it's not tapped. So and then as early as turn 4, you're hitting in for 8 lifelink damage, and it's just kind of GG. The other thing too is you can do Fight Rigging, and Fight Rigging on Pugnacious Hammer Skull immediately flips the Fight Rigging and gives you the Hideaway. And so you can chain into a lot of Discovers that like hit a Fight Rigging, hide away a Trumpeting Carnosaur that comes in, that discovers into a Fight Rigging that you then trigger again, and you get these really crazy loops. Now, one of the cards that I like in this list, that this list is not running, is the Elesh Norn. It might be a little bit win more, but if you're going to be doing the Nia Discover thing, I really like it when the Fight Rigging triggers twice, and for example. I've also seen Lightning Helix added into this list to kind of help stabilize against Monor Red. So this one just leaning fully into the Discover space. So we've got Geological Appraiser, which discovers. We've got the Quintorius Cond, which can downtick to Discover 4. Also, every time that you're casting something from exile, then you're getting a ping for 2 damage and gaining 2 life, which works off of the Discover mechanic because you're playing that card from exile. Virtue of Loyalty gives you the 2/2 White Knight creature token with Vigilance. If you miss your Pugnacious Hammer Skull, does give you an early play, and then kind of gives you these later board pumps. Honestly, this I feel like is a little bit out of place compared to the rest of the deck. I'd rather see something like 2 Lightning Helix or 3 Lightning Helix and an Elesh Norn. But you can just run away with the game with the Virtue of Loyalty. And then we've got 2 copies of Cease and Desist. Exiling cards from a graveyard can be good against specific strategies. And then the Destroy All Artifacts and Enchantments hardly ever comes up, but occasionally it will. We've got the Trumpeting Carnosaur, which, as I mentioned, is part of the Discover loop. Spinewind's Armadillo is in here for ramping. So if you don't have the Pugnacious Hammer Skull, you can be ramping to your finding your lands and gaining 3 life, which kind of gives you, it almost gives you like, so Herd Migration has the same thing where you can cycle and gain 3 life. So I think the creator of this deck was leaning further away from Lightning Helix because you're gaining the life off of cycling your Spinewoods Armadillo and your Herd Migration, more so than actually playing these as top-end threats. So, life stabilization into crazy cascade loops. That will be number 2. And then number 3 here will be Monor Red Prowess by Galactoid. And they hit Mythic 166, and I've actually seen Galactoid here in the community, so hope you're doing well, Galactoid. And 71 and 26 for 73% into Mythic. Absolutely crushing it with the Monor Red Prowess space. Now, I usually lean away from decks that are meta, because we already cover them in my best of 1 meta review. That being said, I really enjoy playing this deck. So I played it last season. I went 50 and 25 for like a 60+% win rate. It's a really great deck, and I think it is I've played a lot of the Rakdos aggro space, and I definitely agree with this build. Bringing the Callous Sellswords down to 2 prevents you from having too many in your hand and no threats on the board. I really like the 2-2 split between Antagonize and Blazing Crescendo. Demonic Ruckus. I still feel like maybe we could drop the 2 copies of Demonic Ruckus, but I do know it helps against the Boros Convoke. And then bringing in the direct burn, which a lot of times Prowess is ditching. So we've got the Lightning Strike and the Play with Fire, which helps us with the mirror match of destroying other people's Slickshot show-offs, as well as giving us some late game reach if we weren't able to quite seal the deal. And the way that we're making room for this is we're dropping out some of the stuff that's a little bit weaker to the instant speed interaction, or sorcery speed interaction for that matter, of Cacophony Scamp and the Picnic Ruiner. So you have, I think that like this deck still has the ability to really hit the turn 3. It's leaning a little bit further away from it when you're running the 4 Picnic Ruiners and the 4 Cacophony Scamps, because you can sack with the Callous Sellsword the Cacophony Scamp to deal 3 times its power. That's definitely a route that this is leaning a little bit away from and leaning more into the Slickshot show-off. And then I really like this inclusion of the Pyrotechnic Performer, being able to flip this up with your combat tricks if they've figured out a way to kind of stall out the board. And then a lot of times people will think that this is the Fugitive Codebreaker, because that's a common one in the Prowess space. And so you really can catch your opponent's off guard with this card, and it works really nicely with your Antagonize, your Blazing Crescendo, and your Monstrous Rage. And but yeah, and then the Felonious, we still have a little bit of it, right? Like the Cacophony Scamp 3 times thing, it's still there. The Felonious Rage giving haste to your Picnic Ruiner is still there. And not running the black, to occasionally cast the creature side of Callous Sellsword. I know some lists have explored it. I don't think it's really important to include. And then I do agree with including Sokenson with 18 lands. I've played it. It works out really well. So the reason why I wanted to include this one is just because, Galactoid, that's a very impressive win rate into Mythic, and there's enough going on in this deck that my bot doesn't actually recognize it as Monor Red Prowess or as Rakdos aggro. So it is really a unique approach and a unique build. And then the 4th deck here that I'll be putting up is a repeat of one that I showcased earlier this week, and that one is Golem Prowess. And partly just because I want to rerun in that space, and because I think I got 5 out of 6 games on the draw, and this deck has been getting many people into Mythic. So this one was by Thranduil, which is a different person than the one that I talked about earlier this week that also hit Mythic. And so this one hit Mythic 283 for 58 and 38 for a 60% win rate. And it's weak to the Orzhov life gain space. So if you're running into a lot of the Monor Red Prowess, you can definitely look up the Orzhov life gain or Orzhov Amalia deck in best of 1 is kind of a hard counter to that deck, or to this deck, because it gets out of range of being killed and then has the black removal at instant speed to get rid of the Slickshot show-offs and the Picnic Ruiners and such. So interesting though that this was basically the same exact list that I showcased earlier this week. So several people have been able to climb to Mythic with it, and I got 3 Lightning Strikes in the sideboard. The list I was running earlier this week had the Lightning Strikes in over the Urabrask's Forge, so there is a slight variation in this, and I think it's the three shocks instead of. I'll have to go back and actually look at that. But the lightning strikes I was running, and could be wrong. The especially we do have a higher land count of 20, which makes the lightning strikes a little bit easier to cast. But a lot of the prowess decks I know like to lean on the shocks, especially if you've got the snakeskin veils that you also want to keep up. So tapping out is where this deck gets complicated because you want to cast your snakeskin veils to protect your. The classic line is you attack, your opponent waits until you play Monstrous Rage on whatever creature, and then as soon as you cast the Monstrous Rage, they go for the removal. So it's nice to have the Snakeskin Veil up to protect that, and then negate your opponent's removal. So I know it's a lot of prowess right now, and that's just how the best of one space is right now. So 2 out of 4 of my meta breakers are just prowess decks. And so I'm hoping that during the rotation in August 2nd, we'll see some variation, because right now this is just like the easiest way to climb into Mythic is off of Slickshot Show Off. So hope that you enjoy these meta breakers every Sunday. I do enjoy doing them. And again, don't forget to place your vote on the community tab on YouTube. And I'll see you guys all tomorrow for the proper best of 1, best of 3 meta review for Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Take care, everybody.